Suppose to start this thing off, right? We always let the clock turn back a little bit, Facebook, normally I have a nice music in the background. Facebook kind of blocked um, my live videos because of the music. So I just have to do it with my humming or my voice. Some people advised me this week that I have many talents, but singing is not one of them. So that's not what I'm going to do then today. But maybe next time I will, right? And we count down 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and a one. Yes, welcome, welcome. This is Shah here at the place, as always on Tuesday, 12 o'clock. Dallas time, welcome, welcome, welcome with a new topic. If you don't know what this is all about, right? It's the place. We always say for more connections and more answers, or be more by doing more. Every Tuesday on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. It's kind of what we call free coaching, I guess. So if this is the first time that you're here with me here at the place, drop me a message. But welcome, welcome, welcome. You can follow me either on Facebook Live or on YouTube Live. That is all up to you, of course, right? I'm also always going to check really quick if my live thing comes through. Yes, I think it does. And if someone can let me know if the sound is really good, that would be nice as well. You know, before I forget, uh, um, don't. I'm going a little bit too fast today. Before I forget, don't forget to like me either here on Facebook Live or on YouTube Live. YouTube is a new channel for me, so it's growing slowly but steadily. But it would be nice to be subscribed there as well. Not just because it's nice to have many likes, because it doesn't matter so much. But what matters is you can see actually uh, all past episodes of the place here as well. All right, without further ado, let's go. Start here. Welcome at the place, episode 218 of Tell It Is already. Can you imagine that? The Everyday Life Lesson podcast. And today we're going to talk about the pain or the suffering of the lacking of creativity. And this falls mainly under the life energy, creative energy. Duh, that makes sense, right? Also known as the passion energy. Last couple of weeks ago, we did a whole subject only on that energy as well, and we expand a little bit on that too today. So there are five life energies. Um, so the first energy is physical energy. That's where your physical exercise come into play, your sleep habits, your nutrition, what have you not. Your second energy is the mental energy. It's easy to measure whether that's, let's say, in a good place. If you know how to quiet down your mind at times and you have a lot of positive self talk, then you know that your mental energy is in a quite good place, right? Um, what we talk about today is your creative energy, or also known as your passion energy. That's easy to measure actually. If you have a lot of imagination and you know what to do with it, then that is often a sign that you have creative energy. What people don't know often is that actually the relationships that you have are also residing and are no, maybe not controlled, but influenced by your creative energy. Your fourth energy is the manifestation energy. That means actually what do you put out there in the world, right? That's not only money, but it's also the services that you provide, and maybe your creative products that you do, right? And last but not least, that's your divine energy. That's where you find your purpose in life. And it doesn't always have to mean that you need to believe in God. If you don't, that's fine by me too. And if you do, that's great too. And that's what's kind of, influenced by the divine energy. Um, these five energies were first introduced by my best-selling book, Broken Silence. If you don't have a copy yet, just pick one up. Normally I have a picture, but I'll do it this time this way, right? Just pick one up. The proceeds go to a non-profit organization, and the show is actually sponsored by Broken Silence. So, without further ado, the hidden pain of the lack of imagination is what we are going to talk about. Yeah. So Albert Einstein said imagination is more important than knowledge. Although, I mean, Albert Einstein was a person of knowledge. You might be surprised by that saying. It's a very famous saying, so you might have heard it before. But he said, "For knowledge is limited to all we know and understand, while imagination embraces the entire world." What he means, it embraces, the things that you don't know if they really exist, and they incorporate your past experiences, but it also anticipate maybe what you can foresee is coming in the future. You need to have a lot of imagination for that. So, while imagination embraces the entire world, and all their effort will be to know and understand. So, imagination, according to Einstein, already incorporate things that we don't know or don't know yet. Yeah, through imagination, people can explore ideas of things that are not physically present. Yeah, or not present yet. Okay, cool. I think that's a cool saying. Actually, I go often back to that saying and see, how much that it is used at this moment. But it goes for me even further than that. More people than not are suffering from the lack of imagination. And you might say, "Oh, Marjan, that's a heavy word, suffering." Well, it's the title of this show. It's called the hidden suffering of the lack of imagination. So, what I mean with hidden suffering is that and that's not only you out there, it's also me, we sometimes don't even know that there are things we suffer from. Does that make any sense? So, I always compare it with this, right? If I don't move at all, everyone knows by now that I'm a passionate dancer and dance instructor and dance coach. But if I would not go on the dance floor and I would not move around, sometimes I actually don't know that maybe my right shoulder is a little bit bothering me because maybe I was sleeping in the wrong way. Just if I just be on the couch and watch television, it's a lot of things that I don't feel, that my body is not functioning well. And that doesn't mean that it would not have an impact with me on later life, right? So by moving more, I start to discover more what areas in my body I need to take care of. Does that make sense? So a lot of the things that of the sufferings that we have are because of these things a little bit hidden. I hope that makes a little bit sense, right? So many people feel that they have no or very limited creative ability, but very seldom do they know that the lack of creativity creates suffering in their life and the life of the people around them. Again, that sounds really heavy, but if you bear with me for today, you might find actually there is more truth in that than not, right? So this week at Place, the hidden pain of the lack of imagination. George Bernard Shaw said, "Imagination is the beginning of creation. You imagine what you desire, and you will what you imagine, and at last you create. You create what you will." Now, I am not going so deep today into the difference between imagination and creativity, right? So I might use them a little bit interchange. So forgive me for that. There is definitely a difference between those two, but that's maybe for another show. Okay. So imagination is the source of all that is brought to us. But when we reach maturity, we must deal with things like paying bills, just the mundane things in life, working, committing to relationship, and starting families, and so on and so on. And what you see is that, and it happens already after the age of 23, 24, sometimes even before that, is that our imagination decrease. Now, there is not one accepted scale how you measure imagination. So take what I say a little bit loosely in this case. But truth of the matter is, you know, that. As we grow older, most people actually, their imagination goes down unless, you are maybe in a profession where creativity is, an integral part of what you do. As a dancer and a choreographer, I need to use my creativity, but sometimes I also reproduce maybe something that I have created before, and it might not be that creative after all. So, by just saying, hey, I have a creative profession and therefore I have a lot of imagination, might not be true either, right? So, let's be open and critical, which is part of imagination. By the way, you will find that out later. And listen to hopefully listen and see what I have to say about it. Right? If you aren't where you want to be in life, right? Not only the place that you want to be, but if I don't want to live in Dallas and I would rather live in Bora Bora or an island, and if I'm not driving the car, and that's literally a mundane thing, but it could be a thing. In this case, the car stands for the material things you have, that you're dreaming of. And there's nothing wrong of dreaming about having materials possessions as long as it's not becoming your number one thing, right? If you don't have them yet, so for me, it's a little bit easy to imagine if I don't have the car yet that I want, if I don't do the work that I do like I want to do. So if I'm not in the career that I want to be, or I'm not on the career path that I want to be, even if you're not in the relationships that you want to be, then it's likely because you have been utilizing your imagination. You have not been utilizing your imagination, or have been dreaming too modest. Right, so yeah, you think about do you immediately have to change now? No, 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 no. Just stay with me for a little bit. Yeah, modern coaches use this a lot. This principle where people say, "Hey," so someone on Facebook said hi. Yeah, if you want to say hi here on Facebook, then you can do that too, right? Let me see if I can do something in here. I don't know how to that works actually. Oh yeah, here. See, if I do it like this, Facebook user said hello. I'm still working. Well, that's good to know. And okay, so sorry, I'm digressing here a little bit, right? Yeah, modern coaches, they say that a lot, right? You just find out where you are today, and then just dream and imagine where you want to go, and then just imagine that, and then miraculously you will get that, right? And the whole the law of attraction hype that was going on in the late 90s was based upon that. And actually, to be honest, the law of attraction, there's a lot of good things in there. Just we just brought out half of the story, but that's another thing. So they use that all the time. I do that too, by the way. So if you're not are where you want to be, then maybe you should dream bigger, and then it will happen. That's of course not the case, right? Because what it does not address is the suffering that comes for many people from their current state of being. And it is in that suffering, actually, that we don't dare to imagine, or we don't believe anymore that the dreams that we had actually can be fulfilled. Does that make sense? Let me repeat it again. So, if the suffering of our current state is so big, and we might not really feel it, right? We might just have been accepting it and be complacent in it, that we actually gave up on our dreams, or just don't know how to dream altogether anymore, right? So, and that happens a lot. And we live in, most of us, by the way, that I typically talk to. That's not true for everyone in the world. So um, but for a lot of people that follow the place, if you can follow Facebook Live and you watch it at your phone, which is typically a few $100s, or you watch it at your laptop, you are at, quite an interesting place already, right? So, and I know that when I was talking to my dad, and my dad passed away about a year ago, a year ago and a few months. And yeah, someone is entering, and let me tell you that right now too. By the way, someone is entering the Zoom room. If you want to enter the Zoom room later in the after party, then that's good too. So I say just hi to the people on Zoom. I will be with you in a few moments. Um, so if you are listening to the plays, and if you watch it on your phone, you actually, if it comes to the rest of the world, you're probably in the top 4% of the world, believe it or not, right? When I was talking to my dad about these ideas that you need to imagine things, and then you can improve your life and stuff like that, he said, yeah, 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 that's all good and nice. My dad became 97, by the way, and he was born in 1924. That's a generation that grew up in the Depression and through the war. So that's a generation of hard labor. There was not a lot of time for them, and he had Catholic family, big family, right? He had 8 kids. Well, he and my mom, of course, we had 8 kids. Unfortunately, 2 of them passed away in the due course of our life. But it was a pretty hard life in the beginning that they do. There was just very limited imagination, but he broke out of that and he actually started to imagine. So if I talk about imagination, I'm not talking immediately, painting a painting, like the Sixtine Chapel, or create a statue like the Statue of David. It could be really small. My dad imagined a better life for his family than he had himself, right? And so he took us when I was at the age of 7. He already took us, the whole family, on vacation to Spain. And you think, wow, what does that mean? No one would go to Spain in that time. There were no highways. You had to go on a map. Half of the people that I talk to today don't even know what a map is, right? And so you would drive, and then you came to the Belgian border. You had to exchange money to get Belgian francs, and then you went to the French border, and then you had to exchange money for French francs, and then you came to Spain, where they had the Spanish pesetas. I almost forgot what it was, and it was crazy. It was really crazy. So my dad thought he did not had a lot of imagination, but he did. He imagined that his family would have a better life than he himself, and he did that. And one of the inspirations came because one year when I was 6, we went to a campsite and if there was a Dutch people online, they know where that is. It's in Renesse, which is in Zeeland in the Netherlands. And we went there for 2 weeks, and 1 week was completely destroyed by rain. And my dad said, never again. I'm imagining something else. And he mentioned to us, and he said, I heard about a place in Spain. Now, that sounds really ridiculous, but the world at that time was much smaller. It seriously was, just to give the modern generation a little bit of a feel how that was. At that time, there were no color TVs yet. Seriously true. I'm old, so when I was 6, there were no color TVs. It was just that came. We had maybe two broadcast. How do you say that? Two networks. So what is you had the Dutch television one and the Dutch television two. There was two. You could not see anything else. If you're lucky, you could also see something from Belgium and see something from Germany. That was all there was, right? So the world was really small. There were no mobile phones. In fact, we did not have a phone at all. Oh yeah, how did you guys survive with no phone? I don't know. There was no phone. It was just not. If I had to make a phone call, we went to a phone booth on the street, or I went to the neighbors and say, "Here, you have a dime. Can I make a phone call?" That's just how life was, right? And in that time, my dad took a car and drove to Spain. You have to imagine that. That's a 3-day car ride. Anyhow, I'm just love to tell this story over and over again. But but people accept a little bit the thing. My dad's story ends also a little bit sad because at the age of 55, um, he retired. He was military, and he had no bigger dreams in life anymore. His life, when it became okay, he had a mobile phone then too and stuff like that, but it became smaller and smaller because he thought, you know, 55, I'm old, life is kind of over a little bit. And he didn't explore any big things anymore. And we didn't know it. We didn't know it until maybe 40 years later that we saw how small his life has become. And that's what I call the suffering that we don't sometimes see. Sometimes we get into work, and if you're from a generation where I'm from, and definitely my parents, you just took on a job and you stayed with a job as long as you could. Nowadays, if someone stays with a job for 2 years, they already think they have a massive long career. In my generation, you stay with a job for 25 years at least, right? So we just accept it. And if that would have been accidentally, you would be a mailman, then you would stay that for a long time. There was only a few people who knew how to break from that. Nowadays, there are coaches like me talk a lot about it and how to break free. But still, if you measure it, 80-90% stay in the life that they want, often afraid for various valid reasons, by the way, why it's hard for them to change. And that's what I'm talking about. That is the hidden suffering because of the lack of creativity. All right, so that sounds heavy, but you know it is. it is what it is, right? It comes from where they actually are, that suffering. It comes from the job that we have. We don't want to change it. We like the security of the paycheck that's coming in every other week if you're in the US, or every month if you are in the Netherlands or in other places in Europe. And then also, we kind of accept what we have. And if you live in suburban Dallas here, that sometimes, is disguised as a pretty good life. If you look at the houses here, they're pretty big. We typically have two, three cars in the garage, all that kind of stuff. But could still be hidden suffering, because maybe we do it not for ourselves. We just, created some wealth, but there is not so much creativity in that life anymore. And it has a huge impact on your mental health. And we see that later as well. Yes, and it's also true for the relationships we're in. We often accept how our relationships have become. And that doesn't mean that you, says the man who is divorced, by the way, but it doesn't mean that I immediately say you need to leave your partner if you're not happy with your partner, right? There are many creative things to do to make your life better, including your relationships, right? So, yes, some people say it's never too late to start a new path or walk a new life or change your career or even perhaps start a new relationship. That is definitely true, right? I have a slightly different saying, right? For a lot of things, it is planting a tree. The best time to plant a tree was probably about 100 years ago, right? But the second best time to plant a tree is now. Does that make sense? So that is definitely true. But if you actually don't know that you are in a place of suffering or are in a place where life has become still, and it doesn't mean your whole life, but it could be, typically people talk about their career or their relationships. Those are the big things in life, or even in their free time, what they do for a hobby. Then it's maybe, time to listen a little bit to what I have to say here and maybe look for some change, right? Um, so it's actually true that a lot of us just have accepted, without even knowing, the pain and suffering and the state that we are in, right? So I'm just always taking this example of athletes, and most of the time I'm taking the example of dancers. Dancers, they go through a lot of physical pain, trust me, right? Dancing is not always a hobby that goes through pain, but there's something really good at it. Dancers typically know their body and they know what they need to work on. Like I said, if you never go on the dance floor or any form of exercise, or do you say it? How do you say it? Well, let me not try to say a word that I cannot pronounce, right? If you don't try to move, right, you don't know that you have that pain, right? And then that pain might get worse, and it might come to a point that you actually get some serious illness. If you dance, actually, and I know some people who had smaller heart conditions or smaller other conditions, and it was detected because of the way that they were moving. Does that make sense? So you caught it a little bit earlier. So, and that is actually true with a whole lot of things in life. We start to accept things that are just like that because they are like that, like a job that you don't want to be in. So, in other words, Napoleon Hill, in one of his books, right? Napoleon Hill is the writer of Think and Grow Rich, and he wrote another book which is called Interview with the Devil, and it sounds like a really cheesy title, but it's a really good book. I can highly recommend, right? Um, and he calls, that's the first time where we hear the word drifters in this type of if this type of context. It's taken over by many people. By the way, most modern coaches is taken over from Napoleon Hill, although most don't want to admit it, but it is absolutely true. And they become drifters, and it starts in the age of 20 already, where people give up on their dreams, where imaginations go down and start to just accept what life is throwing at them. For 80 to 90%, statistics still prove that it's unfortunately is true, right? Now, you also need to live in a place where you actually can change that, right? And most people in the modern world are in a place where they can change that. Then, the question is, why don't they? Right? Okay, maybe we see that too. So most of us don't even want to hear this. Literally, they say, "No, no, sure, I'm perfectly happy. It's not the best job what I do, but when I'm retired, I'm going to do the things that I want to do." Okay, that's kind of the world upside down, right? That is the American dream. The American dream is you go to school, then you get a job, then you get rich, and then if you're rich, you can do whatever you want to do. Um, Well, I'm not saying that you immediately can do whatever you want to do, but maybe there is some middle ground there, right? Maybe there is something like when people hear that I changed my career from being a corporate director into a dance instructor and do what I want, they say, wow, I wish I did that. I said, well, I decided that when I was in my 50s. So I'm not sure. Well, actually, I was in my late 40s. But that's pretty late if you think about it. I'm just a late starter, so to speak, right? So it doesn't mean that you always have to do when you're 20. I just, discovered that. And I had a ton of fun, by the way, working for corporate. It's not that I hated everything, it was just really not me. Yeah. So a lot of people don't want to hear what I have to say here, don't want to admit because it is so much told to everyone. Make a career, go work in corporate, make a few $100,000, and then you're happy. But unfortunately, the truth, and I'm part of that, is a truth of broken families. We have huge obesity in, and not only in this country, also in Europe, by the way. The numbers of abuse are still going through the roof. So don't tell me that we live in a healthy and happy world, because we don't. And I'm glad if you're individually healthy, but if we look at the community and how we function as a community, something is missing, and one of the key components is imagination, right? I was drinking coffee at a coffee shop called Spin Coffee and Records here in Dallas, and it's an amazing story. It's owned by a Colombian man, and I love him. We always have good talks, and so at the time in the late '80s and early '90s when the CDs came up and the records, was that time? Am I correct in my timeline? I think I am. And the old records, they went away. He had a vision, and the vision was saying one day people will buy records again, and everyone thought he was an idiot. Right, so everyone who wanted to sell his records, he would buy them for 10 cents a piece. True story, true story. He has now a warehouse of about 30,000 records, and he sell all these records for about $40 to $50 a pop. You know, the guy is not a millionaire at all, but he is a happy guy. His son is also in the company, right? And he needed to have an outlet, and he loves coffee, so he also started a coffee shop, and it's called Spin Coffee and Records. It's here in Dallas. I would highly recommend too. The coffee is one of the best coffee you can find. He has one of the best espresso machine, and if you sit there and you are from my generation, then you hear Crosby, Stills and Nash, and you hear Bruce Springsteen, and you hear all these old records that he plays on an old record player. And then just 3 days ago, we were sitting together and no one was there. Seriously true, and we were looking at one of the first record players, literally one of the first record players. And then he and I had the same thought. This was one of these miracle things. We said, you know what? Those inventors of then, when there was nothing, right? I mean, the record was definitely not the first medium to play music on. It was more like a cylinder at that time. But the first guy who came up that idea to say, hey, is there maybe something that I can reproduce music and blow it through some sort of a horn so that people can listen to it, right? That whole process, you have to think about it. Now we think, okay, yeah, we now have an MP3 player in our phone, or we have a CD. Well, most people don't even know what a CD is anymore. So we know how to, but the first person who was thinking about, can I capture music? And so that I can listen to it at another time on when I want to listen to it. That's the thing, right? Before that time, it was an orchestra or a singer, and you can only listen to music if you went live to that place or to the singer, right? There was no radio broadcast, there was no anything of that. But then there was someone who said, you know, just imagine the fact that he came to the idea, can I capture that? Now, you could think about things like a telephone, they're a little bit related, or maybe the first wheel, the first eyeglasses, all these kind of things that people invented for the first time. A lot of the things that we do nowadays, by the way, except in electronics, actually are only reproductions and improvements of things that have been invented before. The ultimate imagination is, of course, when you come up with an ultimately clearly new thing. Now, I'm a believer in a Christian God, and this show is not about that. I don't want to impose any beliefs that I have on you at all. I just think it's a great story. I think the story of Genesis is just a great story. Whether God did that in 6 days and the seventh day was a day of rest, doesn't matter to me at all, right? What matters is that there is someone or something that created something, and some people say that's created by evolution. That might be true too. And just want to take you in your concept. And I've always struggled with this sentence that we are, created in the image of God. I like, man, is God a good-looking man as I am? Well, then he's a lucky fellow, right? But he could also look like some other people, and then he's not. So I think that cannot be it, right? It's not. It doesn't mean like he looks like me, right? So then I think, and then I see and like I said, don't hang up because you don't believe in Christian. That doesn't mean that there is nothing for you to learn out of Christianity, right? And then he talks a lot about being the creator, right? To being the creator of new things that were never there before, right? And I always feel that if I create something new, that I tap into that defined piece of energy. If I see some of my choreographies come to life, and they are not, world shocking at all. I'm not pretentious in that way, but if I see some students dancing that in a way that I think, yeah, that's what I had in mind, that is something like unique that has never been before there, and not in that shape or form, at least, and maybe in another form. And I know choreographers with way more abilities than me, and I'm always in awe what they can create. And I like to listen to music that is new and stuff like that. So anyone is always in. We all love new things if they are creative and there was a lot of imagination, and it's often found in art and all that kind of thing. So a lot of people think, oh yeah, creativity is only for artists or inventors. That is so not true. On a day-to-day basis, guys, we need to be have imagination. If you had kids, or if you have kids and you have raised them, you know how much imagination you needed to have sometimes to make them eat their breakfast, right? That was not an easy task at all. So there are many things where we need imagination for. It doesn't have to be always these big things, right? So, nothing limits achievement like small thinking, is what William Arthur Ward said. So, our thinking typically becomes smaller, and then our thinking becomes about reproducing only things, or sometimes only improving things instead of coming up with new things and original things in life, right? And yes, is every aspect of the dance that I create original? No, absolutely not. I wish it was. And sometimes I come up with absolutely new inventions, and it could only be 2 or 3 seconds or one movement that I think, oh, I've never seen that movement before. And that's what I'm going for. It's not about the whole dance. Typically, a dance is 2 minutes in the dance style that I do. It's not that all the 2 minutes are new, but the way the dancer dances could be absolutely new too. So that's a super big creative process. Does that make sense? So I continue with William Arthur Ward. He said, "Nothing limits achievement like small thinking. Nothing expands possibility like unleashed imagination." So, in preparation of this episode of Tell, the Everyday Life Lesson, I came across an article of Peter Himmelman. And Peter Himmelman, he's a Grammy and Emmy nominated singer and songwriter. He's a visual artist, he's an author, he's a film composer, he's an entrepreneur, a rock and roll performer. If you know a little bit about music, then you know him. So, he is a creative person. That's the only thing that I wanted to do. And he wrote something that I actually didn't immediately agree with. He wrote that creative people share three qualities that he called very specific. He call no, sorry, I said that wrong. He has three qualities that he calls the following. It is either specific, it is present. No, it should be specific, present, and true. So let me say that in another way. Here, creative people are always specific, present, and true. I think. Not sure if I agree with that, but interesting. I started to read that and said, okay, specific is that they break down big goals into doable pieces. Yeah, I think that's a good thing, but that's true for non creative people too. They're present, they take actions on those pieces in the here and now. I think that's a good quality if you can do that. That has nothing to do with your creativity, I think, so they don't postpone things in the future. And then true, so they're true to themselves. The things they are engaged in are things that they feel passionate about. I said, okay, that's an interesting take. That's probably what you need. So I skipped a little bit over that because at first I thought, not so sure if that's true. But then I thought actually it's a helpful modality for people who are actually not so imaginative at the moment and want to tap into what I just talked about. So, so the suffering from lack of imagination can also be broken down in two parts. So you have the actual lacking of imagination or creativity. Let's say you don't have it at all or very limited. Well, then of course, if you don't have it, then you don't know how to apply it either. But let's say you can imagine a lot of things and you have a lot of daydreams, but you are actually afraid to put them out in the world again. And that's true for a lot of people too. If you ask them, at the end of the life, is there anything that you regret what you did? The answer is often no. I don't regret so much what I did, but I regret a lot of the things that I didn't do, right? I wanted to be so much a pilot. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to dance in Blackpool. All these kind of things that you hear, and I even hear it here in the U.S. Simple things like dance. Ooh, man, do you go to Blackpool? I said, oh, I wish I could do that. I said, do you know that the average price going to Blackpool is cheaper than dancing a competition in the United States? Don't kill me for this or throw me out of the organization because it's absolutely true. you know Dancing competitions in the US are extremely expensive, and relatively to that you can pay a plane ticket for it. Hotel costs are dirt cheap in Blackpool, and the competition fee is almost nothing. Right now, if you come from the Netherlands, then it sounds really expensive to go to Blackpool. Yeah, everything is relative, right? So that's it. So you either have no imagination or you have the imagination, but you think you cannot execute on it, right? So if we lack of imagination, then our life becomes completely stale, right? Life becomes like stale. It comes to something that you actually don't like yourself, right? So how can you let your creativity and imagination flow? Now that would be at least one or two sessions. So I do the short version of this, right? Your imagination is full with possibilities simply waiting to be assessed, right? There are several methods to get your imagination going. So utilize techniques like positive affirmation to consciously alter your perspective of yourself, which is an important thing because often our imagination stops because the perception that we have of ourselves is too small. We think, oh, I am just not able to do this. I am not smart enough. I'm not rich enough. I am too Asian. I'm too white. I'm too black. I'm too tall. I'm too small. I'm too old. You know, I'm too sick. Whatever we put in there, we need to change the perspective of ourselves first. And then put on your observational cap and be aware of everything around you with all of your senses. I have a really good exercise of that. If you're interested to that, just send me a personal message and I'll send that to you as well. How do you do your observation for a few minutes by shutting your eyes and revisiting a nice memory? Think about when you were young and what your dreams were. That helps to start up that imagination again. Asking yourself what might happen if you accept an opportunity rather than declining. How many job offers did you see in the newspaper? Well, I don't think people read a lot of newspapers anymore, but you see, that's where I'm old. But in the past, you looked for a job in the newspaper. That might be a concept that doesn't exist anymore. But anyhow, wherever you young people look for job opportunities, there are many times you think, no, 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 I don't think I'm smart enough. I'm not qualified for it, and so on and so on. Right? So maybe you should say yes, and maybe there were opportunities that you don't immediately see, right? Um, um, to and live a little bit more inquisitive, right? Ask way more questions. That's what actually what it said. Spend more time outside than inside, I would say that. There are many ways to unleash imagination again, but everything except for starts by accepting first, of course, where you are. you know we can do many mental and physical exercises to stimulate our creative thought process. um, and there might also, be some unexpected things that you don't know about, like it is easier to open your mind. Yeah. And that's the key to imaginations in rooms with a high ceiling. And that sounds really weird. Yeah, where are you going with this? Yes, it actually there's some cool research about that. That people that work in rooms with a higher ceiling, 10 feet or higher, right? They It's easier for them to open their mind. Or if you want to solve bigger problems, go outside. It's actually proven that you can solve problems in a more creative way if you are in a space that's bigger than the average room. Now, on the contrary, there, if you want to work out details, it's better to work in a smaller room. Is that weird, right? I just wanted to throw this in when I was preparing for this talk. That there is so many research done on this. It's just crazy. Yeah. So, in other words, it actually comes to the word divergent, right? Imagination involves divergent thinking. So, just in layman terms, you have an open, wide mind with, where you're open for multiple solutions and possibilities and not seeing roadblocks, right? We all know people, and maybe we are the same ourselves. Like, okay, if we do this, and they immediately start to mention the roadblocks that we have, right? Like, okay, you want to dance in Blackpool? Yes, yes. Okay, but then I need to have a passport. Yeah, okay, you go abroad, you need to have a passport, right? Okay, but then I need to have a partner. Yeah, that would be helpful if you have a partner, right? Okay, do I need to speak another language? No, no, no. They also speak English in England, so don't worry about don't worry about it. Yeah. So a lot of people, they think like, I want that, but then they only see, what we say in the Netherlands. We see bears on the road, right? We see roadblocks. That's what we see in the Netherlands. So if you have a way of divergent thinking, you know there will be roadblocks, but for your thinking you skip over them for a little bit. Now it's like my dad said when he goes to Spain. I don't know whether there's a lot of traffic right now. There is no GPS. I don't know whether the traffic lights in Brussels are on red or green or yellow. I'll see it when we get there. And that's how we went 1 mile after the other, right? The roadblocks, they will be there, but most of the roadblocks in life you can solve, right? Have that confidence. On the contrary, on the opposite side of divergent thinking is of course convergent thinking, which means honing into one solution and focus on details. You need to do both, right? But if you immediately start there where you only want to focus on one solution and don't open your mind that there sometimes are multiple solutions to the same equation, then you actually stop your creative thinking, right? You narrow yourself down too quickly, right? But you need to do both. If you only do the other one, nothing will happen. That's a little bit more my mentality. But if you put people like with my mentality in a team and only those people, then we dream a whole lot, but we don't do a lot. Yeah, does that make sense? And not a good combination, right? So you need to do a little bit of both. And then this for me was actually, I should maybe started with this. This I thought was the most interesting part that I found in research. And that is you need to embrace your limitations. A lot of modern coaches say, go beyond your limitations. But the remarkable thing that I found in research is that the people who started to accept their limitations suddenly became super creative. So we see athletes that lost their legs and they became higher and better athletes because they embraced their limitation. If I would ask them, would you like to have your legs back? Of course, they would say they would have to like their legs back. But before they had their legs, they were not as motivated to do what they wanted to do. Some people, it's when they become to a certain age they say, oh my gosh, I always wanted to be a dancer. If I'm not going to do it right now, it won't happen to me again. So there are guitarists that lost their fingers. There are painters who have no hands. I can go on and on and on with people, Christopher Hawkins. Is that his full name? Do I say that correctly? The famous scientist? Yeah, I think so, right? I mean, the man couldn't talk anymore. He still was, is responsible for a little bit negative, to be honest, but one of the biggest thinking concepts that you can come up with, right? So there's so many people that have seen as creative, and this is a little bit where the myth comes in, that people who have a mental illness are more creative than other people. And that is absolutely not true. What is true, if you research creative people with a mental illness, then they score higher on creativity. But that doesn't mean that the healthy people actually, you know, are not creative or cannot be more creative than them. Does that make sense? So, an example is always Vincent van Gogh, or in the US, we would say Vincent van Gogh. I don't know how the Americans say it, but anyhow, he's Dutch. It's just in case you didn't know it. He was born quite close to where I grew up, and and he had mental illness, and so they say, and there were more painters, but Rembrandt van Rijn, that's the second, if not the first, most famous painter in the Netherlands. No mental illness at all. He was a really good businessman, right? So not so true, all these things, right? So, but then if we have the creativity, then what, right? And then I come back to this Peter Himmelman again. He said, okay, you need to be specific, you need to be present, and you need to be true to yourself. And I would like to turn that around in closure of this today talk, because I go a little bit over time already. Find first out what your passionate is. What are you passionate about? And if you know what you're passionate about, that's a really good place to start and ignite your imagination. Right? I wrote a book about it, by the way. Right? I wrote a book, Living with Passion and Purpose After Sexual Abuse, because what research also shown is that trauma stops often our imagination. And if I do be really hard on the people that I work with, is partly because we are still in denial of our own abuse. And it could be in denial of your own trauma, whatever that trauma is, whether you're a refugee, whether you were born in a minority, whether you have one arm. I don't care what your, but yeah, you don't know how it is to live with my, limitation. No, I don't. And I feel super sorry for you, but you probably also don't know what it is to live with my limitations. But it is never an excuse to not live the life that we want to live. And to live the life that we want to live, we need to have a lot of imaginations and let imagination flow. Does that make sense? So Peter Himmelman started with, you need to be specific, then you need to be present, and then you need to be true to yourself. I would turn that around. Be first true to yourself. Know what you're passionate about. you know don't be overly compelled from outside motivators. Don't look too much to other people. I'm not saying, a lot of people say don't do look at to other people at all. That's also crazy. Of course, you live with outside world people. I put my life in service of other people, so I'm passionate about that. That has nothing to do with me alone. So it's just not be overly compelled from outside motivators. Does that make sense? So don't miscrew those words. And then, yes, definitely you need to be present, but it's not the power of now craziness. And I'm just debunking here always a lot of things of a good writer, Eckhart Tolle, because you need to think about the future, and you definitely need to take in your old experiences, because that ignites your imagination too. So, yeah, the present is only there to take actions. Yeah, that's what you need to do. Don't postpone them. Don't say tomorrow, plant that tree today. And then last but not least, you need to be very specific. Break down your goals into smaller pieces, and, be happy with every step that you actually achieve. Now, all right, almost at the end. Yeah, then to close it, maybe I have two more myths that I want to debunk for you if it comes to imagination. So, some people say, I already talked that creativity and mental illness. Yes, it's often said that a high level of creativity within people that are suffering from mental illness. No, but that doesn't mean that you need to be mental ill to be creative. So don't use that as an excuse. The opposite is probably more true. Creativity and imagination has been mental health benefits, including overcoming trauma. Yeah, if I work with people with abuse trauma, just helping them to imagine a life that they can lead again, helps them to overcome the trauma. So that is myth number one. And myth number two is the funny one. We have to end on a light note anyhow. Yeah. Is creativity something of the right side of the brain? That's always said, one side, the right side of the brain is about creativity, and the other side is about more what you call rational thinking. Both things are literally not true. Yeah, the belief that the left hemisphere completely controls logic and the right brain governs creativity is largely a myth. Creativity and imagination involve communication between the networks throughout both hemispheres of our brains. And research shows that too. Those networks work together and collectively manipulate these images and symbols. So that's for today. I always try to debunk some myths here, and this was one of them. Not a big deal if you still believe in your right and left brain kind of thinking. You know, it just happened to be not so true as most people think. Anyhow, that was that. This was Shah here at the place. I hope this inspires you to be creative, and I hope to see you back, of course, next week here at the place, 12 o'clock in Dallas. So this was Shah with episode, what was it, 218 already? Yes, 218. Bye bye.